So nice to, I am in awe. I mean, literally just a few hours ago, I got to watch this movie, and all I could say is, you're the man. I think if everybody was putting forth the effort that you're putting forth, that the world would be a much better place. So share with our audience who might not have seen this movie a little bit about yourself that I haven't already covered and what you do.
Yeah. Well, I had been traveling to Laos to reconnect my students with missing relatives. And whenever I would come back home to America, I would speak to any group that would sit still and listen. And I would tell them about the widows, orphans, and amputees that I had met in Lao villages and the plight of the Lao people with unexploded ordnance in their country. And I had the feeling that if I spoke to enough groups, told enough people, that something would come together, something would coalesce, and more would be done for the people of Laos. And I had my epiphany in a church basement in Wausau, Wisconsin, when after my normal speech telling about the problems in Laos, somebody in the audience said, you know, Jim, there are only 35 of us here. You need to be speaking to 350. Maybe you need to be speaking to 35,000 people. There are just 35 of us here in the basement. And then I had my epiphany that it didn't matter how many people I spoke to. It didn't matter how much consciousness I raised. It didn't matter how many well-intentioned people I sent home feeling guilty about the plight of the Lao people, unless somebody did something. And that day I decided that if I were going to maintain my own sanity and be true to myself, I had to do something. So I left my job as a school principal and I started traveling to Laos and leading teams of Lao and Hmong technicians to clean up ordnance from villages. And this is the first year in 21 years that I'm not in Laos because of the pandemic. Right. It's the first year in 15 years that I haven't been sleeping in a tent on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Sadly, an individual can't do enough. And a small NGO like our organization can't really change the vast problem that Laos has. But maybe we can by raising consciousness among the right people. Maybe we'll see our government or some other nation's government step up and do the right thing by the Lao people.
So I'm sure that a lot of people that are out there watching this that have been in that same position where they feel passionate about something and they want to do something and they're doing everything they can. But I think that the difference for you is that you took the next step and made things happen. How did that become a part of being a film? Well, how did that come across?
I was just going about my usual business in Laos, living in a remote village, and we were trying to expand gardens by taking our metal detectors into agricultural areas and cleaning ordnance. And lo and behold, there were two journalists from New Mexico, Karen Coates, Jerry Redfern, and this must have been 12 or maybe even 14 years ago. And they had a passion for the problem. So we quickly became fast friends. And they asked if they could film the team, if they could film me, do interviews. And so beginning in that distant past, that was my association with the filmmakers. And a lot of times people express an interest and you never see them again.
Sure.
But in Karen and Jerry's case, they were back a couple of years later. And a few years after that, back a third time. Then they came to Wisconsin to talk to refugee families that I worked with who had the experience of having fled the country. And my heart goes out to them, my great admiration. They kept coming back. And there was a lady in one of the villages where we were working who said, you know, a lot of aid workers come through. They always tell us, we'll see you again, we'll be back with help. And the lady said, We never do. They leave and they never come back. And then she said, but you folks are the real thing. And that's my admiration for Jerry Redfern and Karen Coates. They are the real thing. They've put their heart into this film, and I hope that they get a good audience. I hope people are moved by it. It's a remarkably sensitive film, but it's just full of heart from Karen and Jerry.
Well, and don't sell yourself short, Jim, because that comes a lot from you as well, no doubt. So this was a long process. So give me an idea of the timeline of how long it took from the time you first met to the film was a complete project.
Yeah. Well, when I say the problem will never be solved, America's bombing of Laos made the country of Laos the most heavily contaminated country in the history of warfare. And so many millions of cluster munitions were dropped on the country that it just staggers the imagination. There are 10,000 villages in Laos, 10,000 small villages, 1 out of every 4. 2,500 villages are blighted with ordnance.
Wow.
About 30% of the Lao countryside is contaminated. So to say we're going to clean that up, it beggars belief to think that we could correct that massive problem that we have created. And we just have to start where we can. We do one village at a time. We make a few hundred people safe, and we hope we save some lives. We hope we take away fear. But people ask me, well, how long could this go on? Well, we don't know. We dropped bombs on Laos that we had no way of forecasting their longevity. Now we make a guess. We say, well, this ordinance is probably good for 100 years in the soil. So to say it's been there for 50 years, we're just talking about bombs that are essentially teenagers.
Right, yeah.
They haven't even reached middle age yet. So unless there's a real concerted effort to get very serious about removing the ordinance, this blight is going to continue for another 50 years or more.
And what do you think is between scaling what you do to a larger effort to clear this up? What's getting in the way of making that happen?
Yeah. Well, my effort could be dismissed as just existential, that it's an individual who feels compelled to do it, answers that compulsion, and works on a small scale. I've got a hope that I have a bigger impact, that the right people see this film and somebody moves our government to put not just tens of thousands of dollars, but millions of dollars into the effort. If not our government, maybe there's a European nation, maybe there's an Asian nation. It's interesting. There are countries that are working in Laos who have no responsibility for the bombs. When I've been working most recently in Sinquan province, the nearest NGO to my team are Norwegians.
Oh, really?
So here's Norway, who had no part in contaminating Laos, but they're there making an effort. The Brits are there, Japanese have been there, the Germans were there but have left recently. Anybody who really sees the problem, unless they completely lack humanity, people who learn about the problem want to do more. Our problem is that it was a secret war.
Right.
It was great effort not to let American people or Congress know about the problem. And so the most common reaction I get from an audience of people who learn about our work, and I'm sure it'll be a reaction from people who see the film, they'll be saying, oh, certainly this problem must have been solved earlier than this. And the harsh reality is to say we've done very, very little. And on our conscience should be the 20,000 victims of leftover bombs since the war ended.
Have you had any discussions with legislators along the line? I mean, you've been doing this for a long enough time, and I'm sure there's been efforts. Has there been any discussions that have gone anywhere?
We did have an exciting period of time when Secretary of State Clinton went to Laos, and I have wonderful photographs of her interacting with one of the bomb victims in the film. And President Obama introduced increased funding toward the end of his administration. So there have been efforts, and it's not to say that America has not made a contribution, but it's a matter of scale. We now give Laos for an entire year of cleanup what we used to spend on just a couple of days of bombing. And we bombed for 9 years. We bombed for 9 years at a rate that would have been a bomb load every 8.5 minutes around the clock.
My goodness.
So it really, it's trying to find some metaphor for this to help American people understand the problem. We often talk about the number of accidents, the number of victims, and we have seen progress through risk education in villages. We're seeing fewer accidents every year, but the dead and wounded is only one measure of the problem. Even if we were to reduce greatly the number of killed and injured, you have millions of people who lack food security because they're afraid to expand their gardens.
Wow.
Time and again, I've gone into villages and said, how could you be feeding a family of 8 or 9 out of this little postage stamp of a garden? And people will say, oh, my grandmother died to make the garden this big.
Oh, my
We can't make it bigger because if we try, we'll hit the bombi. So if we can come in and remove bombs from a village agricultural area, will not only mean we've made people safe from death and injury, we'll also bring food security, we'll remove fear, and that's a big contribution.
Well, it's huge. It's immeasurable, especially for those of us privileged to live here without having to even think about these sort of things. Share with our viewers some of the information that led you in Wisconsin to become attached to Laos.
Well, if you were to say Wausau, Wisconsin, almost at the junction of the 4590, the latitude and longitude, the center of the northern half of the Western Hemisphere, if you'd say with our climate that we've become a home to Asian refugees from a tropical country, but we have. We've had almost 9,000 Hmong refugees move to our community. Well, I shouldn't say refugees move, they're the offspring now in second and third generation. But Wausau, Wisconsin is now 13% Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And we have wonderful success in watching people being assimilated. It was my work with those families of refugee children that took me to Laos in the first place, opened my eyes to the problems there, and then really forged my commitment to looking for a solution.
Well, I think that everybody out there that watches this movie will have that same sort of feeling. The movie is showing Sunday at 12:45 at the intermediate school, and of course you can stream it online. In your opinion, what can the people that do watch the movie and that are moved, what would be your message to them? What can they do to help?
Well, the solution is going to be in the hands of 535 people, 100 senators, 435 representatives. There needs to be a groundswell of people who contact their Congress people and express an interest in seeing the problem solved. One of our senators in Wisconsin visits every county in the state of Wisconsin every year. And so I've trailed that senator, and I've spoken, given my 3-minute liberty to address the senator. I've talked to him wherever I can catch him in Wisconsin. And we're on a good enough term that he once said to me, Jim, you're the only person who has ever raised this issue in any of the counties that I visit. So I would really hope that in Mahoning County or Wood County or Hamilton County, someplace that Ohio's senators, or if we have an audience outside of this area, that people would contact their congresspeople and say, I'm aware of this problem and it needs to be addressed properly.
Well, film is a very powerful medium, in especially this day and age. It's consumed at a higher rate than ever, so I think you have to be excited about the prospects of this working to your advantage to get something done.
Yeah, I am thrilled, yeah. And again, I take my hat off to the filmmakers. I'm just a guy trying to do a job. Karen and Jerry did a remarkable job with this, put their heart into it. When you read the credits, you're going to see how little help they had. This is a work of art that came from their talent, and I think people will be impressed when they see the film to see the impact of two hardworking American journalists.
And are you doing, obviously you're here, are you doing any more film festivals? Are you doing anything else with the film at this point in time?
My understanding is that the film has been accepted in 3 other festivals.
Excellent.
2 of those are in the United States, 1 is overseas. I doubt that I'm going to have the opportunity to be at those. I will if it were appropriate, but I really am hoping that the filmmakers can get to some of the festivals and speak to their skills and bring understanding to the problem that they possess.
Well, I feel it's been my honor to have you here and to have met you. You definitely pulled on my heartstrings, and you got my attention with your film and your passion. And I'm sure everybody else that watches the movie will as well. And I wish you well. And I think that you're going to see some movement on this, because I think that this is too powerful of a movie not to get something done. So
Well, thank
congratulations.
you. Thank you.